Welcome to a new session here. Let's see. Last time we have the ability to render nested entities in the UI. And what do we want to do this time? Today is November 3rd. We want to maybe be able to ability to unparent an entity in the UI. Ability to add components to an entity when selected. Let's see, take a parent mem, create a nested string. We did this already. Present nodes that can be expanded, so we did that. Unparenting is the same thing I'm talking about. Write a recursive content, so we did this already. Display some nesting of parent and children UI for entities. That did that. Allow unparenting. Okay, did that. Okay, so we're back to this components, color, position thing. All right, let's see what we can do. So let's make a branch, a git checkout branch version 0.0.6. Go and okay. So we have this show live space, and every time we select something, we select an entity here. And as we select this entity, we maybe need to determine if it has a parent or not. So maybe instead of just sending the entity ID, we can also send in the parent ID and then set that. And then if the parent ID is set, does exist, then we can have a button. So first we need to pull up the show HTML here, and actually we're rendering it in this nested UL, so let's pull up that module, nested UL. And in the content tag, when you're clicking on here, when you're clicking on an LI, we're sending this thing. But we can also send its parent ID, which would be entity parent ID, which could be nil. So now in the show, when you do a select entity, we'll set the parent ID is parent ID. And then we'll add the selected parent ID into the assigns. So assign socket this, and how about selected parent ID will be the parent ID. And we want it to have an initial value. So go to the mount and say that copy this, selected parent ID is nil to begin with. And if we open up the app, we'll just make sure that there's no errors when we try this. So we'll open up to our local host, under spaces, got a single space, and if we select this, and select this, well, let's display the parent ID, which we can do in the show. In this inspection area, we can say inspect the selected parent ID. So let's see. So we'll do this. Selected parent ID is nil. I open this. If I select this, it has a non-nil parent ID. I'm thinking maybe we should just want to get the entity. Then we don't have to have another attribute for this, right? Selected entity would be that whole entity. But then it's hard to serialize the whole entity. Yeah, I probably don't need it. Let's do this. So we have the ID, which means that you'll be able to unparent it. And when you unparent it, maybe you just want to remove the parent there. Okay, so let's create the button. So in the here, here, if selected entity, show the delete button. And within here, if selected parent ID, then also show a button that says unparent. Okay, let's refresh this. So if I select this, it has no parent. But if I open this and I select this, it has an unparent and a delete. So if I select unparent, it's not going to go anywhere, but we'll send it Phoenix click and we'll say unparent entity. Unparent selected entity. Passing in nothing, right? Because we know what the selected entity is. Okay, so we'll just send that, which will go over here. Unparent selected entity. And we don't care what this is. And what will happen is we'll do the spaces unparent entity with socket assigns selected entity ID. And then we will clear, so assign to the socket selected parent ID, that will be nil, and we'll reload the tree. So socket equals reload tree with the socket, and then we'll just no reply with the socket. So we expanded this one. So box NFBH is a child of cone, but if I unparent it, it should come back to the top level, which is here. So I will expand this. we could take the box BJ7 out. Box BJ7 is out. Its children are still intact. Let's take the sphere out. It'll come back to the top level. Sphere AK9. Sphere AK9 survives here. I can move this from this parent to this parent. So if I parent, then box VET will be under sphere AK9. Parent. Box VET will be under... Oh wait, sphere AKJ will be under... I think that's right. Let me refresh to see if this was retained. Okay. Cone. Let's take the sphere out. Unparent. Let's take this out. Unparent. Take this out. Unparent. Uh-oh. This has a plus button. Box BJ7. Refresh. Box BJ7. Looks like there's a plus here, but I can't actually expand what it is. Alright, let's take a look at what the resulting tree is. Okay, let me remove a couple things. Let me remove this one, cone. Remove this one. Remove this one. Remove that one. Remove this one, and remove this one. This is the only one, and it has a plus button because it has a child count of 1, but no children. So something screwed up here. We got ourselves in a state where the count and the children don't agree with each other. Oh, we probably didn't update this correctly. So we parented something. We unparent. So whoever you unparent, maybe that count is incorrect. Let's take a look at our spaces function here. So when we when we parent something, let's see, parent, and unparent. Unparent an entity. So you get the parent. So this is the child. And you get that entity. So this is the child entity. And if entity and it has a parent ID, you get its parent, or you update its parent. That seems right. And you update that entity, and then you do entity unset parent. Change set, which changes the child. Okay, I think this looks right. How about parent? Parent entity, yes, you get this thing. Oh, but what if this was assigned to the wrong parent? It might be the case. Okay, so there seems to be some fragility there. So we've got a box, we got another box, we got another box, and let's put cone. Let's put the cone in the box. Put the cone in this first box. Parent in there. Got a cone in the box. Now if we put this cone, oh, you parenting it over here, which is unparent here and parent here. Okay, so a parent operation needs to also unparent any previous. Okay, so that's the thing. So if you parent an entity, you're going to need to grab the set parent change set. So entity set parent change set sets the new parent, yes, and then it updates that parent. But if it has an old parent, yeah, if you're moving it, you're not just parent and unparent, you're moving it. So we should see if it has one. Select, here's the entity that is itself. Unparent. We should unparent it and then parent it. Yeah, I guess we should. So let's grab the parent. We need to grab the parent. So check if child already has a parent. So how do we do this? From in entity select parent ID where ID equal child ID, and query equals that. And then repo all queue results. What does this give us? So let's say you have, let's just say repo all entity. Just grab one of these. ID that. And import ecto query. And let's say copy that, paste that. Whoops. Undefined function child ID. Oh. So this would be the ID. And what is the result? The result equals repo all queue. That gives you. Okay, so maybe just do entities. This is again ID. What's happening here? Binary of 16 bytes, got that. Please make sure you use the value by the matching that convert the value according. I guess it's not casting it correctly. I guess, but it worked here. I mean, it's fine here. Give me like the whole entity for now. Just E in entity. And so this will give you the entity, which it should be there. And if entity.parent ID, then you're going to want to unparent the entity with the child ID first, and then you'll do the set parent to the new one. So this will select the parent ID, and if there's an entity and the parent ID, it will decrement the parent ID and it will update the child entity. We could actually skip this portion, but that's maybe an optimization for later. For now, this should actually, let's recompile. Oops. So if we move this one, I want to move this one here, parent. Oh, something crashed. First argument, not an atom. No, we don't need this. From E in entity, where E is that? Okay. Alright, we're going to take this, parent it over there. Nope, something happened. Now we just say entity equal repo.get with entity and child ID. Is that a thing? Get entity ID. Yeah, that works. Move this over here, parent. Did it work? Move it under Pelmore. Move it under Pelmore. Pelmore, it's got it. Cool. Okay, so I think that part works. Ability to unparent entity. Ability to add components to an entity when selected. So now we want this thing where if you highlight this one, it's the selected entity, and then maybe we'll put some information about that here. So maybe in the show, there's something about add entities. Maybe put this a little bit higher. So if selected entity ID, then we'll do like a horizontal row, selected entity, and maybe we'll put the name here. Actually, we don't have that conveniently available, which is why maybe we wanted to, when you're selecting let's see, select entity. Instead of stashing the ID, we can say selected entity. Now let's change this around a bit. I'll do a little bit of refactoring here. So we got page title, and we got space. We want selected entity, selected previous entity, and we won't need the parent. Okay. Entities becomes the everything, and we got expanded nodes. Okay. Reload tree is that function. Add to expanded nodes, remove from expanded nodes. Add entity, we'll call that function reload the tree. Delete selected entity, so you get selected entity ID assigns selected entity dot ID, and you will delete that, and then assign selected entity will be nil. Remove from expanded nodes, yes. Okay, select entity, you'll get this. We won't need the parent ID set to us anymore. So we'll get the selected, the previous entity, of course, will be selected entity. And if previous entity's ID is equal to current entity's ID, no op, it's already selected. Otherwise, selected entity equals get the entity. So spaces dot get entity with the entity ID, and we'll switch this over. That's fine, and we don't need this one anymore. Unparent the selected entity. So space unparent entity comes from socket assigns entity selected entity ID. And then the selected parent, we don't have to do anything about that. Okay, reload the tree. And parent selected entities. So you have two entities selected. So we have the current selected entity ID and the selected previous entity, that ID. And parent them. Reload the tree. And then you unset these things. So the entity, okay. Handle event expand entity. So you're expanding an ID. Probably don't need this unspect. So the socket becomes a socket. Add it to the expanded nodes. Reload the tree. Don't need this one. Okay, and you collapse them. Identity remove. That seems fine. Now we come back to the nested UL. So instead of passing in, let's see, entities and ops. Well, let's go to the show here. So we're going to displaying this liveform component up there. Name, description, slug, live patch. Okay, so if previous selected entity, if it's there, if you have a previous selected entity and you have a selected entity, you can parent them. And if you have a selected entity and you have a selected entity, and it has a parent, then you can unparent it. Okay, and what else? Add entities. Option for select the kinds. That seems fine. Okay, so here I have to send the selected entity ID, which there might not be. So this could be nil. So let's change this into setting the actual data in. So we'll get this and this. Okay, so if selected entity, and you have a selected entity, do that. So then nested UL, we are passing in the ops. We need to see, we have a problem here with prev. This will be prev entity, and selected entity not found in here. So this would be, if you pass this in, ops, selected entity ID. It has to exist, and there's safe navigation, right? Ops, selected entity ID, and so we have to do something like this, and ops.selected previous entity ID equal to that. So previously selected, I think that's the only place we're looking at that. Selected parent ID not available in the template. So let's see. Selected parent ID. Let's see. Selected parent ID. Oh yes, it's not available anymore. And does this still work? Ooh, what happened there? Nil.id is undefined. So, okay, when you click it, what happened? Select entity here. Show line 64. Selected entity. Previous entity ID. Previous entity. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, the previous entity. Previous entity might not be an object. So, okay, so you get this thing if entity is a thing and it has an ID. Okay, so we can select that, we can select this, we can select this, we can expand this, we can select that. So this one parented this one, it's already parented it. So It won't do anything. Or will it? Disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. Just circular reference maybe. So we'll parent that. It's in there. And if you do this, or if you do that, it'll say make this, put this underneath that, which is already in there. And something weird happened. Spaces. Give me all the entities of a space. Entity tree flat. There are no top level. Get space top level. Get space. Get all entities for space. There we go. Get all entities for space. What's going on here? Parent ID is E. Blah 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 blah. Parent ID. Everything has a parent ID. But the parent IDs. Parent ID is 1AF. Here's 1AF. 1AF. It's one child. But this one has a parent, and its parent is A09, which is this guy. Yep. Self-referential. This guy's parent is E65, which is this guy. E65, and E65's parent is BB1, which is this guy. So how is that possible? You shouldn't be allowed to set a parent. But I thought I wasn't. I thought I was. Some other thing. So let's just reset. Mix ecto reset. New space. ABC. Here you go. Okay. Add a box. Add a box. This is the selected one. SJ goes in D8. Oh, SJ. No, this will make D8 go in SJ. Oh no, I did it the other way. You pick the... Oh. I thought I was picking the parent. No, you picked the parent last. Okay, so yeah, I screwed up there. I sent it to itself. But still, we should prevent that. So prevent ability to add components. We want to prevent circular references in parenting. Really, the parenting is kind of a minor feature. I think I want to get to the ability to add components. So anyway, we have this, and if we do select something, this is a selected entity, we want to add a components table. So entity has many components. So let's create that. So mix Phoenix gen live Phoenix live generator. Let's see what this looks like. And let's just call this components. And this will be hell. I don't know what the context is. Components. Start into spaces, I guess. Spaces, components. This is, so it has an entity ID references entity. Is that right? Entities references entities. It has a kind. Let me see what we used for entity. We said that this was a type. Okay, so we have a type, which is a string. Does it need a name? If a component just has, I think it probably does need a name, doesn't it? No, but you can only put one type, so it lives on an entity. You can only put one type, one unique type. So if it's like position, it's a position type. I don't think it needs a name. The type makes it unique. And then it needs data. So data will be JSON B. How do you create this? Phoenix Ecto embedded type. Embedded schema. Migration. Phoenix Ecto JSON B migration. Add properties map default this. Create. So is that right? Data JSON B. Give it a try. Unknown type social structuring. unknown type. Array, binary, boolean, decimal, float, map. Oh, map. Okay. Add these to my router. Router. Route. Come on. Route. Source. Lib. Route. Where the heck is the router? Gotta be in the web, right? Router. Spaces. Entities have components. And let's take a look at the migrations. Migrations. Repo migrations. Primary key false, binary ID, references, entities, on delete, delete all. Binary ID, entities, data map, yes. Okay, and what was in here? You've got spaces, component, data map, binary ID. Okay. Mix ecto create. Sorry, mix ecto reset. IX mix dash x x mix Phoenix server. What do we got? What do we got? New space test and show. Sorry. Let's do create an entity. So we got a box. Select this. Now we have entity. Spaces. And what do we have here? Under components. New component type and all kinds of data. Key value. Hi. Bye. How is it going to be valid? Okay, we'll stop here. We'll figure the rest out later.